Welcome to End of Life University on YouTube. In today's interview, I am sharing with you an audio only conversation I had with Mike Kravinsky. He is the writer and director of the film Nothing to Do, which is based on his experiences as a caregiver for his father at the end of life. And it's a wonderful film. I think you'll really enjoy our conversation. So stay tuned for that. If you haven't already, be sure to subscribe to this channel and also subscribe and leave a rating and review for the podcast wherever you happen to listen. And if you have a little change to spare, check out eoluniversity.com/support and you'll find 3 different ways you can make a small contribution to help keep this channel and the podcast on the air. Thanks in advance if you choose to do that. And now we'll move on with my conversation with Mike Kravinsky. Today, I'm happy to welcome my guest, Michael Kravinsky, who is a former editor and technical director for ABC News in Washington, D.C. After a 29-year career in the news, Michael embarked on a new career in narrative filmmaking. And today, we're going to be talking about his film, Nothing to Do, which I'm very excited to share with you. It's an excellent film. So, Michael, thank you so much for joining me today.
Thank you, Karen. Thanks for having me on the show.
Yes, well, I'm so glad that you reached out to me and shared your film with me because I'm not sure how long it would have taken me to discover it on my own. And it was truly a pleasure to watch. So I want to get into that a little bit about after working for 29 years in television news, what inspired you to shift your focus to narrative filmmaking?
Well, actually, I left ABC in 2010. And, for those that follow, there's a lot of downsizing in news, fewer people to do the same job type of thing. And so I was offered this opportunity to take a buyout and I took it. And so I wasn't quite sure what to do. I started creating these little short documentaries, just about like news of the day type of thing, because I could do it myself at that point. And but then I realized I was just really doing the same thing that I'd always done, which was some version of the day's news in a summation, summarized it in a 2-minute piece. And so when I first started out back in my 20s, going into news, I thought, I'll maybe be here for a year and then move out to Los Angeles and try my hand at filmmaking. But ABC was so great. It was a great place to work, great people, great experiences. So I stayed. And so it just occurred to me that the technology is there, that I can write and do my own films now, my own narrative films, not documentaries. And so in a way, it was my reinvention. I was basically doing the same thing I always did, but in a different way. I wasn't doing documentaries anymore. I was doing fictional stories, that, where the actors could basically, do anything they wanted to create the emotion for the story. And that in itself was just an amazing learning experience, amazing growth experience for me.
So you had this 29-year detour in a way in the news.
Yes, it's been described that way.
Yeah, it ended back up in filmmaking, but it sounds like the timing was perfect since the technology is here now for you to do what you always really wanted to do.
Right. You see a lot of that happening now. There's a lot of small, very small independent films that are being done for just that reason. Financially, people can do them now. And really what's stopping you is, do you have a good story? Do you have are the characters compelling? Basically the only thing that limits you is your ideas, because as I say, the technology has become simple enough and so inexpensive that, pretty much anybody can make a film now.
And you're also free to pursue subject matter that perhaps, a big
film production company wouldn't have taken on, like this film, Nothing to Do, that really focuses on death, the death of a patient who's getting hospice care, much more than that. And we'll talk more about the story, but that's a subject matter that I would think 10 years or so ago, it might have been hard to make a feature film about that topic.
Oh, yeah. Well, I had mentioned before we went on the air that there's a lot of films that are being done now that deal with that. There's even a film that's coming out in the summer, about a mother in hospice and, being done by large companies. But the thing is, there's films out there now where, a few years ago, my film, others who've done them, in the small realm, that were the ones that started it. And all of a sudden it becomes this subject that, people are finding interesting to talk about because it's something that we're all going through, caring for a parent at the end of their lives. And, so I think it was good. It was good that the technology was there, that others and myself could kind of deal with this subject matter without worrying too much about having to spend a lot of money, and, having to have a great opening weekend or something like that, more like building an audience.
Yeah. And Mike, one of the things that really impressed me about Nothing to Do was how true to life it felt to me as I was watching, as a former hospice doctor, and having participated in these family situations and events over and over again. I was really impressed with your treatment of the subject matter and how you wrote the story. And I'm just wondering what inspired you to create this story.
Well, Nothing to Do is a fictional story, but it is based on my experiences with my father at the end of his life in hospice. One of the, my father passed in 2012 at age 100. And at the time, as I had mentioned, I wasn't working at ABC anymore. My brother is still employed full time. And so really the responsibility of caring for my father at the end really fell on me. And so he came to our house. So a lot of what is in Nothing to Do is based on my actual experience. Certainly some of it's dramatized, a lot of it's dramatized, but a lot of the interaction between the father and the son is actually, what I experienced, and, kind of that overwhelming feeling, I've got to care for this person. I don't know if I can do it, but then you do, and you do just fine, and in the end, it becomes this like amazing moment in life. You are caring for your parent, and you look back on it. I frankly, I'm really proud that I had the strength to be able to do that.
And you did such a good job of portraying that entire journey of when the reality hits you that, oh my gosh, I'm here 24/7. This person needs me all the time.
Correct.
And this is a huge job. And I think none of us can really be prepared adequately for that realization. It just happens when you find yourself in the situation and you wake up and realize what lies before you and how
Right.
big the challenge is.
Right, absolutely. He was in one bedroom, and so we could easily go in and out, and but I would wake up every morning and wondering if he'd still be alive, and and he was, and he'd like be awake, and he'd like point at me, and and it's just like. Then we'd start another day, and of caring for him and doing the things that I had to do. So a lot of the moments that are in Nothing to Do was my day-to-day life. Now, granted, in Nothing to Do, there's a lot of things that are fictional. Like Kenny is kind of a free spirit, I guess is the best way to describe it. And what I wanted to create in Nothing to Do was a guy that had never really had any responsibilities in his life. and this is his first responsibilities. His first responsibility is caring for his dad, and it's a whopper. But he pulls through and he does what he has to do, and in the end, it's just he accomplishes this most major task of caring for a parent at the end.
And one side story that I really appreciated in the movie that's very true to life is that Kenny has a sister who's not very accepting of the idea of hospice, and the conflict between the two siblings, that felt very real to me because I've seen that play out over and over again in families
Right.
I work with.
Right. Actually, in our family, we were all on board. My brother, my father and I, we were all like, we basically, he was in the hospital. They said, it doesn't look good. You might want to consider hospice. And, my brother and I were just like, Dad, whatever you want to do, it's okay with us. And, he basically said, which is in the movie, he said, I'm done. And so, he even signed his own hospice admittance forms. Basically in our situation, there really wasn't too much tension. But I've spoken with a lot of hospice coordinators, and my brother-in-law is a geriatric physician in Atlanta. And and we did a scene in a funeral home, and I spoke with the funeral director, and he says, this is like the most emotional time, and fights it's just common. And he goes, sometimes I just need to leave the room and let people yell at each other for a little while, and then I come back. And so I used all of that research of family members, arguing about what's best for mom or dad, and I included that in the film. And the way I describe it is, everybody wants to do what's right, but what's right isn't always the same thing. And so that is what I wanted to accentuate in Nothing to Do, is that, you've got this hard-charging, more accomplished sister who wants to send her dad back to the hospital to get well, quote unquote, which is really an impossibility. And then you have this kind of chill brother who, gets stoned all the time and, has never really done any kind of major accomplishments in his life. Is like saying, why don't you just let dad do what he wants? And so that in itself is just, it pushes them apart in the beginning, but it brings them together at the end.
Yeah. That's a really gratifying aspect of the story as it unfolds, is seeing how they are able to come to terms with one another and find common ground.
Mm-hmm.
And it reinforces for me the importance, and this is what I hope that viewers will come away with from this film, the importance of having had these conversations about these difficult choices earlier, before it's time to call in the hospice nurse, so that a family has had a conversation and talked about it with their parent, and they all are on the same page and know what their parent wants, and they've had time to process how they might feel about it. But I don't know, my dream is that would help alleviate some of the conflicts at the end of life, but maybe there would be conflicts over other things instead. I don't know.
Right. Well, I agree with you 100% that as a parent is getting older, at least, maybe even without the parent, just saying, where are we going to be on this? Are we going to have fights on this? And just to kind of make sure everybody understands, and then bring the parent in and say, what do you want? Because I am a total proponent of like whatever the parent wants. They may not know about new technology, but they may not care about new technology in medicine. And, they may just be like, they may be done. They may be ready. And it's something that, as the children of the parents, it's something you have to accept. As painful as that is, at least my experience says, it just, why create another level of stress at the end for someone you love?
Exactly. And so there's a responsibility for each of us, on the one hand, as children, for our parents to make sure we have these conversations with our parents, but then as people who will one day be the patient, to make sure we've really thought this through and we really are clear about what it is we want and how we would like to have the end of our life be, so that we can communicate that to the
Hmm.
decision makers and the people who will be trying to figure this out for us at the end.
Right, right. Yeah, I mean, I do believe that there's for us, but more importantly at this point for our parents, just to just to like to have a plan and to know what you're going to do. My brother and I actually discussed this years ago. Years before both my parents passed. What are we going to do? Are you, do you want to do what? And then actually my mom, she wasn't interested in discussing it at all. She was like, whatever you guys want. And we were like, well, what do you want? But then, she developed Alzheimer's. And so the decision came to us in the end. But, I think that we did what she wanted. I think that in the end that she would have been happy with, the decision-making process. But the main thing with my brother and I is that, we were on the same page with both of my parents.
Yeah, so important, just in order to have peace and come together as one for this important event at the end of a loved one's life. And
Right.
one thing I really appreciated that you portrayed so well is the actual dying process itself, which is a process. It takes some time. And I have objected in some other movies. I felt like a patient gets admitted to hospice and the dying process seems very quick, but you were able to portray the days passing by really beautifully. I loved the montage scene where it showed various family members, the granddaughter, the sister, Kenny, sitting with their father at the bedside and just sitting vigil part of the time, but also looking at pictures together or reading to him. And that's really how it is. That's really how those days are spent much of the time.
And that's what I experienced. We my father and I had talks. My brother and his family. The kids. We have my nephew who was doing wheelies with the wheelchair in the room, and we were eating pizza. And I mean, my father couldn't do it at that point, but I think he really appreciated that we were all there and that we were having a good time around him. He couldn't move at that point. My wife, who's was the composer of the music for the film, she came in and played the guitar for him. He was starting to get kind of knocked out of it, and was trying to take his oxygen out of his nose. And my wife, Lisa, came in with a guitar and started playing, and he calmed down. I think those few weeks that we had with him at the end was just really special for all of us. What's Connie Bowman, who plays Rachel, the sister in Nothing to Do. We were talking about it one time, and she says that's the thing that everybody forgets about when you're talking about somebody in hospice. It's the waiting. You're waiting for something to happen, and you don't know when it's going to happen. And the waiting process is just like, is it going to happen today? Is it going to happen next week? Is it going to, you don't know. You don't know when that person is ready to go.
Yes. And that is what's so beautiful, because I think it's in that waiting process that magical moments happen, that I've just seen so much love and so much joy and so much connectedness for families while everyone is in the moment, just in the present moment, waiting,
right.
knowing this event is coming, but not knowing when. And The movie really gives a sense of that time so
Right.
well. And I loved that part of the film.
Right. And another aspect of it is, here you have the father in the bed, and, first it's the world around him, and then it's the room, and then it's the bed. I mean, things get smaller and smaller in his world as he's going through the dying process. But everybody else is still living their lives, and still has to deal with, problems in marriages or job problems or budding relationships or, all these things that are happening to everybody else that's caring for them. And they still have to deal with the day to day, but the person who's lying in the bed is just like, they have one job, and that's to decide when they're ready to go. And to me, that's something that I really wanted to push in Nothing to Do, is that, the world of the kids and, the family and stuff like that is very different from the world of the person who's lying in the bed.
Yes, that's so true. And I really love that the film portrays what's possible with hospice care at home, because the contrast between how a patient like Kenny's father might have died within the walls of a hospital is so great. And these moments, the waiting and the vigil and the connectedness and eating pizza and all of those things that can happen at home just don't tend to happen in a hospital room, a sterile white-walled hospital room where staff are coming in and out and checking vitals, and there are machines. And that's what I want everyone to know is the gem that hospice offers to families, to be able to have their loved one at home and to create this very special environment.
Right.
In their
Absolutely. Well, first things first, the thing about hospitals is, there's hospice care facilities, but the thing about hospitals is that, they're I don't want to say loud, but they're busy, they're active. And the thing about, our home, it's our home, it's like a real place, and, it's home. And, you don't have to worry about getting in your car and finding parking so you could sit there for a few hours in an uncomfortable place. As much as they try to make it comfortable, it's still, you're right, a sterile environment. And as opposed to being at home, and in my case, I was doing some work, and and then periodically I would go into the bedroom and we would chat, and then my father would fall asleep. I'd go back to doing whatever I was doing, but it was like I was there 24/7. But outside of the stress, that personal stress of knowing what's about to happen, the lack of stress without having to drive somewhere or without having to be in a room that's not as comfortable as you would like, which I think colors everything. I think that, home hospice is the absolute best way to go.
Yeah, definitely. Well, I was wondering, when you were caring for your father, did you have any inkling then that you would one day make a film about that? Or was that something that came to you later?
No, not at all. Actually, as I say, I mean, the experience of being there for my dad at the end, caring for him for a few weeks, and then being there at the very end, watching him take that last breath. I was just so moving and so profound, and for me, and so, but I never really. I did this other film. It was a romantic comedy, and then the film came out, and it was on Amazon, and it was doing well. Still doing well, but I was starting to say, I'd like to do another film. That was a great process. I'd like to do something again. And I started writing, and I could not, for the life of me, figure out a story that was energizing to me, that made me want to sit and write. And it was my wife, Lisa, who I was sitting there. I can't figure out what to do. She goes, "Why don't you write about your dad? It was such an amazing experience for you. Why don't you?" And it was like a light switched on. I mean, I was able to knock out the first screenplay in about a month. And then about a year and 24 drafts later, I finished the screenplay. And the screenplay actually did very well at festivals. It was a finalist at CineQuest in San Jose. It was a honorable mention at Tracking B in Los Angeles. I mean, it did really well. And there was even some discussion about optioning the screenplay, which didn't really go too far. But still, just the fact that there was some interest in that, was very rewarding. And so I just decided to do it myself, because I can. And so that's where the whole thing came from.
And so you mentioned the screenplay doing well. I'm really excited that Nothing to Do is now available on Amazon, Dish, and iTunes. And so
yes.
I'm really excited to see this acceptance. Go.
And we just found out a couple of weeks ago, we are going to be, Nothing to Do is going to be released on in public libraries in the US, Canada, the UK, Australia, and English-speaking Asian countries in September through the largest distributor to public libraries in the world, a company called Infobase. And so they're going to be, distributing it digitally to these platforms all around the world. And I'm like really excited about that.
Oh, I'm excited too, because it's such a good informational film. It's not a documentary, but it's entertaining on the one hand, but it provides really accurate information that people desperately need to have. We're coming out of a time when death has been taboo for centuries to even have conversations about it. So,
right.
To have a film like this available that's accurate, but it's not overly confrontive. I mean, I think it's comfortable. People can watch it and not feel afraid of what they're seeing on the screen.
Right. Actually, it's interesting you said that. And by the way, thank you for saying that. Coming from a hospice coordinator, I really appreciate you saying that. I've had other hospice people say the same thing. They said you really got it. But the one I tried really hard not to make it like an 81-minute downer. I really wanted to I wanted to create a film that's about life, about the real experiences of life. But the real experiences of life can also be funny. Things that are funny can happen during this time. Things that you laugh about and whatever. And I remember we were screening at a theater in Arlington, Virginia, and last November, and it was a big crowd, and the cast was there, and we were answering questions, and then at the end of it, some people, we were talking to people in the audience, and this woman comes up to me, and she says, I wasn't sure whether I wanted to come and see this film because my father just died 2 months ago. And she goes, but I'm really glad I did because you handled it really well. And that's just like such a compliment, because as I say, I mean, I really didn't want to have this just heavy film. I wanted it to be about life and life, there's good and there's sad, and that's what I wanted Nothing to Do to be.
Yes, and it accomplishes that really well, being a film about death taking its natural part and natural role in life as life goes on. That it's just something that's so well portrayed by the way the characters that you've included and how you show other scenes of their life taking place during the film.
Right, exactly. Life goes on.
Yes. Well, I was curious about the people who worked on the film with you because you'd obviously had this profound experience with your dad. I was wondering about the cast and crew. Were any of them, how did they respond to the film, working on it? And did any of them have any insights or any awakenings about death and dying?
Well, actually, both the actors that played Kenny and Rachel, Paul Fahrenkopf and Connie Bowman, both of them had experienced that being with a parent at the end. And so they brought a lot of that personal experience with them, and that emotion with them, into the film. The scene where Irv dies, Paul, who plays Kenny, he was really crying because it was like such a touching moment for him, and he was like crying for a long time because I think we did about 8 takes of that scene before we got it right, and so he was pretty much blubbering pretty hard at the end. But that's the thing. He brought the experience of what he had actually experienced with his parents to the film, and the same thing with Connie. So I was, it just helped with, creating as real an atmosphere as you could for a touching subject.
Yeah, yeah. And definitely, I mean, because it's something that happens to all of us, it always still boggles my mind that people shy away from the subject and are nervous about seeing a film when this is the most common experience every single human will ever share, is having
Right.
a loved one die and then facing our own death. And yet it just tells me how far away from that realization we've been as a society that we're just now beginning to embrace it.
I will say that after I was there right at the end with my father and watched him take that. It's not at all what you expect. We've been trained, for the Hollywood death, and but it's not at all like that. It's just this quiet, peaceful, just one last peaceful breath. I mean, it's just the most amazing thing. And when I saw that, all of a sudden, my own fears of death, I was like, this isn't so bad. This isn't, it doesn't look like it's something that I should be afraid of. And I will say that I took away that from, like I was talking to the hospice nurse, right after, within 15 minutes or 20 minutes or whatever, and we were waiting, for my dad to get, the mortuary to come and get him. And so I was talking to the hospice nurse there, and I said, that was the most amazing thing I've ever seen, to be a part of, and to watch what he did. And the nurse turns to me and she goes, your father just taught you his last lesson, how to die. And I was like, that is a profound statement. That's amazing.
That's beautiful.
Yeah.
And that being said, sometimes when people have come to me and asked how they could get over their fear of death because they feel terrified about death, I say to them, you need to witness it. You need to go be with a loved one who's dying, or go to a hospice and be a volunteer. But actually, nothing to do is kind of a low risk way for someone to, to be a fly on the wall. I mean, to actually be there and observe it, because it's such a realistic portrayal of what death.
I appreciate you saying that, Karen. That's really nice of you. I really appreciate you saying that.
Yeah. So I'm all about this. I'm all about trying to get people to learn as much as they can about death and dying through any medium that's necessary, reading books, watching films, whatever it takes, knowing that the majority of people are probably not going to become hospice volunteers. But
no, that's a tough job. I have nothing but respect for anybody who does that. I just like, and this was my father. He was an old man. I can't even imagine what it's like, with somebody who's younger, or a spouse or something like that. I just, the strength that you guys have is just mind-boggling to me.
Well, all of us who work in hospice talk about the rewards of it, though, which you got to experience for yourself. And being a care provider and being able to use your medical training and skills to help a patient and a family during that time, it's really a profound opportunity, and it feels like a gift to those of us who do the work. So I know other people admire it, but we all feel like we're also being selfish in some ways because we gain a lot from doing the work.
Right. That's beautiful.
Well, I was curious for you. One thing, I am a writer. So when I was dealing with grief over my own father's death, I did a lot of writing and I found that was very cathartic for me. And I was curious if writing this film had that effect for you, if it was cathartic for your grief.
Well, I've been asked that before. I don't know if it was cathartic because, I mean, he's my dad, and you sort of expect this to happen. You don't think it's going to happen, but in the back of your mind, it's going to happen. But I will say that writing the screenplay it brought back a lot of the really scary parts of being, the unknown of being the point person, for a person in hospice. And it also, as you mentioned, it brought back the really positive things that my dad and I experienced, like the having the conversations, the going through old photos, having some silly laughs and things like that. And, so a lot of these, even though the screenplay itself, the film itself is fictional, and I say it's based on my personal experience, that personal experience I was reliving while I was writing. And I just found it just kind of, it just made me feel like, oh, that was a nice moment. I really enjoyed that time, or that was a little scary, or that was, and so if anything, it just brought back the entire experience while I was writing it. And I might add, while I was shooting the film.
Yeah. Oh, I'm sure. And even knowing that those special memories and moments that meant a lot to you are now preserved for other people to cherish and enjoy as well through the film.
Yes, it is. And, it's, I hope people take, they watch the film and get something out of it. I will say, though, that the people who are touched the most by the film are usually people who have either experienced being with a parent at the end, or they know they're about to. I get a lot of people, in their 40s and 50s and stuff like that, who have dealt with an aging parent, and they say, what you say, which is, you got it. People where it's not on their radar yet, younger people, I think they like the film, but I don't think they get the film just yet, because their parents are too young.
Yes, exactly. And somewhat like the granddaughter who's portrayed in the film, who stands back a little bit and you see her observing, but not totally getting it in the way the mother does.
That's exactly right. Here's, at the end scene where the father dies and she's in the background, that was the thing. I told her, I said, just imagine this is the first time you've ever seen anyone die. How would you react? And she did a great job.
Yeah, she did. I did want to say the acting was fantastic from all of the actors in the film. And you mentioned that Paul, who played the main role of Kenny, won an award just recently.
Yeah, well, we had, we back in 2000, 18, for the entire year of 2018, we were in about a dozen festivals all over the U.S. And, by November, we had put the film up on Amazon, and we were moving along with getting it on iTunes and Dish TV and stuff like that. And I thought our festival days were over. And by the way, the film has won a number of awards, Best Pictures, jury awards, things like that. But I thought that, the whole festival thing was over because it was going to be on a platform that anybody could watch, Amazon Prime, but we got a call from the Rhode Island Independent Film Festival out of the blue. And, they had seen the film on one of the festival submission platforms. And they said, would you be interested in submitting your film? And I said, well, the film's already out there. I don't know if you might not get a decent audience, if they know they can watch it on Amazon. And he goes, I've seen it. I don't care. bring the film. And so my wife and I, we went up to Block Island, Rhode Island, and took a ferry out. It was a beautiful week. We showed the film, and it got a great reception, and plus we got to go to Block Island. And the most important part was Paul Fahrenkopf, who plays Kenny, got a Best Actor award.
That's wonderful. Well deserved too. He's really great. And
yeah, he was good. He does that hangdog thing pretty well.
Yeah. And then I wanted to just mention, I really enjoyed the music as well. So
I will tell my wife, Lisa Figueroa Kravinsky, who wrote the music and is a professional composer and musician, and it's nice to have somebody like that in the family.
Yeah, definitely. That's helpful.
Yeah.
So, all right. Well, we've talked about the feedback. I would really encourage everyone listening to try to see the film Nothing to Do. So you were saying it's on Amazon Prime, Dish Network, iTunes.
And in September, it's going to be in public libraries in the U.S., Canada, the UK, Australia, and English-speaking Asian countries, available, I believe, for a digital download.
And then if anyone wants to learn more online, it sounds like the Facebook page is the best place to go for someone who wants to connect with you online.
Correct. And that's facebook.com/NTD or if you just put a search in of Nothing to Do movie on Facebook, that's our primary page. And, we just update it pretty regularly with the comings and goings of the actors and how the film is doing and stuff like that. So, it's a pretty active site. They're a pretty active page. So,
well, and that reminds me to ask you, tell everyone where the title Nothing to Do comes from.
Oh, the Nothing to Do. It's actually it was something that my father used to think was so funny with me, which is actually, again, dramatized in the film. Nothing to Do. I used to mope around the house when I was a kid. And I would go, I got nothing to do. I got nothing to do. And my father would suggest things for me to do. And I was like, whatever, 7, 8 years old. And he would like, do this. Why don't you do this? Why don't you do this? And I would just look at him and go, I got nothing to do. And I'd walk out of the room. And he just thought that was the funniest thing. And so he told us that story in his hospice bed. He basically said, of all the things you guys did as kids, Nothing to Do was the most hilarious. And he just used to wait for us to kind of mope around the house going, I got nothing to do. So that's where the title comes from. And it's, as I say, it's mentioned in the film. It's brought up in the film.
Yeah, because I think Kenny actually says that to Irv, his father, that, don't worry, that there's nothing you have to do. Right,
I got nothing to do. And, he's reminded of it. And that's the first time. And then the second time, when they're having their heart-to-heart later on, he brings it up. And again, and Philip Lawton, who played the father, Irv, he basically said it, the reason I hired him was because he said it exactly, without me prompting, exactly as my dad used to say, where he really stretches out do, I got nothing to do.
Oh, that's really great.
Yeah.
Well, I'll remind our listeners that I'm talking with Mike Kravinsky, who's the writer and the director of the feature film Nothing to Do that we've been talking about. A fantastic film that I highly recommend that you watch on Amazon Prime or Dish Network or iTunes, if you can, and spread the word to other people, because it's a great film. Like if someone wanted to even have I'm always pushing people to have some sort of like an evening where they invite friends and family members who might be open to talking a little bit about death and dying, that when they want to introduce the end of life subject, and make it a film night, watch a film together, and then let the film spark their conversation.
Oh, that's a good idea.
I think Nothing to Do would be a great film for that because as I said, it's not too confrontive. It's a comfortable film to watch. I think it would open the door for a lot of different
Right,
topics to come up.
right, right. Well, thank you so much for having me on, Karen.
Oh, you're welcome. It's been a pleasure, and I really enjoyed the film, and I'm so glad that we got to connect with each other.
Oh,
So
yeah, yeah, me too.
yeah, good luck, and I hope to hear about whatever your next project is after this one.
Well, I'm writing. I'm back to writing, so we'll see. But you know, I'm at that same spot again where I'm like, oh, I don't know what to write.
Well, hopefully the inspiration will be there at the right
Right,
time.
right,
Well,
right.
thanks again, Mike, and take care.
I hope you enjoyed that conversation with Mike Kravinsky. I hope also you'll check out the film Nothing to Do. It's really a great film and would be a great one to share with other people for a movie discussion night or even a family movie night. And remember, you can go to eoluniversity.com/support if you're able to make a small contribution to keep us on the air. Uh, Otherwise, I'll see you back the next time. So until then, take care.